session is titled On the Horizon, a View from Huntsville Energy Leaders. You know, this discussion is focused on energy as a key enabler for economic growth, for emergence of communication, digitization, and other key technologies. And the discussion will also talk about community resiliency and what's on the horizon in our city and our community. Let me take a minute and introduce to you our panel moderator, Major General Ken Cox. General Cox, or I like to call him Ken, is a close colleague of mine at the Spectrum Group, where he brings a wealth of knowledge on engineering, energy installation management, city management, operational energy, and BRAC projects. General Cox served 36 years in the U.S. Army and had a full career, retiring as Deputy Commanding General of the 3rd U.S. Army Corps. Prior to that, he served in several command roles for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, including Deputy Commanding General for Military and International Operations, Commanding General, Transatlantic Division, and Commanding General, Southwest Division. General Cox's work included Middle East, Southwest Asia, and Yukon experience. He has a whole depth of battlefield experience from 3 combat tours, service in the Pentagon, and joint and international interagency programs. Without further ado, let me turn it over to General Cox. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Grace, and I hope everybody can hear me okay, and I really appreciate that kind introduction, far more than was necessary, I think, for this opportunity. But thanks to Dr. Bohenik and the Huntsville Innovation Exchange for giving me the opportunity to participate today. This, I think, is a very important topic that many of us have kind of become numb to, because in essence, when we walk into a room, we're not, it's easy to turn on a light switch. If we want to get something cold, we put it in the refrigerator or freezer. If we want to clean our house, you power your vacuum cleaner or whatever system you may have, and it's never a thought. It's always going to be there because we are blessed to live in a country that normally has reliable and secure energy of many different sorts. But that might not be the case depending upon our enhancements in technology or threats from other players around the world that want to impact our way of life. And so today's panel is going to give us a chance to take a look at some of those things, not necessarily from a threat perspective, but from a reliability and resiliency perspective as we talk specifically about energy. Now, you heard that we are a group of energy leaders, specifically in the Huntsville area. And of course, I'm here in Great Central Texas, right outside Fort Hood, but I'm blessed to be able to participate with these 4 gentlemen that you see on this slide. The intent for our panel is to kind of like peel back the onion a little bit and get a better understanding of why energy really is important and what is it that each of these organizations can do in some way, shape, or form to enhance the security, reliability, and sustainability of energy inside their systems and organizations. And so with me today, and my intent is to introduce them separately and then allow them a couple of minutes to talk about the organization and talk about the fundamental concept of why energy is important to them. And then once I finish with the 4 panel member introductions, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and ask them some challenging questions. So first up is Colonel Retired Bill Marks. He's the Deputy Director of the Office of Center of Operations at NASA there at Huntsville, at Redstone Arsenal. Colonel Marks.
Hey, it's first off, make sure I got a good sound check.
Gotcha.
Okay. So great. So yes, Bill Marks. I used to be the guest commander at Redstone Arsenal. Of course, you all know that's the best installation on the planet, and bar none. And so that 10 megawatt solar farm was conceived and developed and competed and established under my watch. Very proud of that. It came with another project that we were looking at to help provide another 20 megawatts of power that I understand the community is still working on, and that would give the arsenal about 35 megawatts of distinct power, specifically to run its 24/7s. And that was developed based off of the tornadoes we had previously that really took out the power around the community and left some very strategic operations running on generator power. And so this is, part of an effort to provide some energy security. The resilience obviously is a big piece of that. And then the efficiency is also a great component of that. NASA Marshall Space Flight Center sees that exactly the same way. Whereas the arsenal is 38,000 acres with roughly 17 million square feet, Marshall Space Flight Center is 1,841 acres of that 38,000 acres, has 316 facilities of about 4.6 million square feet that we have to operate, maintain, heat and cool, power for many different operations, such as we design, develop, build and test the components of the Space Launch System, which is well on its way. We've got a green run test scheduled for later in December down at Stennis, but that was all designed and conceived here at Marshall, depending on that very power that we enjoy. Very expensive. The space launch that you saw, SpaceX, we're partners with SpaceX for both launches, the Crew 1 and the SpaceX, the initial launch, and then the Crew 1 mission that you just saw Sunday. We monitor specific systems on that launch and also all of the experiments that happen on the space station from Redstone Marshall Space Flight Center. So we're very reliant on and dependent on consistent but dependable power that has to have a level of security that is provided for through things like the solar farm and other initiatives that we're looking out for. So we also build and design and build telescopes. We do propulsion design, some level of testing, but most of that's done at Stennis. We're partners with Blue Origin here out at the Marshall Space Flight Center that will do some level of propulsion testing. All requires predictable, consistent power and it can't, uninterrupted power, quite frankly. And so energy to us is how we're able to execute. Energy to us is how we're able to operate, the missions we have in the International Space Station and everything in between here and there, and how we're able to design and test. So it's very important to us. It's also very expensive. So we are on the lookout and attack that component in every way, shape, and form that we can, all things on the table. And we've got some innovative ideas that we can talk about, I guess, later, and how we attack that. So the savings we can get from, not using energy, we can apply to other priorities here at Marshall Space Flight Center, and if necessary, to the greater NASA agency. Great to be with you once again. This is my second one, and they're always a lot of fun and always learn something.
Well, thank you, Bill. And it's great to have you as part of the community after your time there as the garrison commander. I think it's very important when people have a chance to retire out of the military and stay local. You bring a very unique perspective. And of course, your ties to enhancing the energy capability and generation on Redstone will absolutely be imperative as things go forward. Next up is Mr. Wes Kelley. He is the president and CEO of Huntsville Utilities. Mr. Kelley, sir.
Well, it's great to be with you. Thanks for letting me talk about Huntsville Utilities. We provide electricity to about 200,000 homes and businesses in Madsen County. We also provide water to a little over 100,000 in the city of Huntsville, as it is stretched into Limestone County and into Madsen County. We also provide natural gas services within Huntsville. So we've been around for 80 years. Our job is very pragmatic. We are here to make sure that utilities are served, interests are met, customers are taken care of. We try to focus on providing those services reliably, cost effectively, and as much in a friendly demeanor as we possibly can. So we have a very straightforward role. We do engage with TVA quite a bit. TVA is the provider of power in this portion of the world, and so Huntsville Utilities purchases power from TVA and then distributes it through our network to all of our customers. So our team here is about 700 strong, and that's across electric, water, and gas. We think that multi-service approach gives us great benefit because from a customer service administrative perspective, we can share resources. And then we can also deliver coordinated solutions to the customer. That's something sometimes we're still working on, but we try to have it so the customer can interface with us to solve a number of utility infrastructure needs all at one time. So there is a lot of exciting things going on in the energy world, and the fascinating thing that we'll talk about through this panel is those new and innovative things are not happening at central station power plants. They're happening on the edge of the grid. They're happening at the customer premises and on the distribution system that entities like Huntsville Utility operate. So we've got a lot to talk about, and I'm pleased to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Wes. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to some additional comments associated with those innovative ideas. Up next is Mr. Dennis Madsen. He is the Manager of Urban and Long-Range Planning for the City of Huntsville. Mr. Madsen.
Hey, thanks for having me. Just to make sure, can everyone hear me all right? Spectacular. I'm really happy to be a part of the panel. I'm not sure I would qualify as an energy leader, more as a representative of the folks who provide the challenges for energy leaders. My department really looks at kind of looking over the horizon, anticipating growth, anticipating changes and evolution and development patterns. My background has been in planning, but a lot of it was in the private sector, and I've worked in other municipalities around the Southeast. And I have seen what happens to cities that don't make proper considerations for the growth of their infrastructure, and we include energy as infrastructure. When you don't do that, it becomes difficult to maintain sustainable and quality growth. For those folks who aren't familiar with the Huntsville region, we have been the most rapidly growing metro in Alabama for well over a decade. We anticipate being the most populous city probably in the next few years based on recent census counts. We're attracting a lot of growth, in no small part because, as Colonel Marks suggested, the Arsenal is a great employer, but we've got a lot of industry off-post. As we change and evolve in our growth, we know that the demands that we'll be making on the energy industry are going to change and evolve as well. So a big part of that is really just keeping communications with guys like Colonel Marks, guys like Wes Kelley, so that we are ready for the growth that we know is coming.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. And I'm going to be pulling on that thread also with regards to growth in the community and how that relates to the ability to provide a very essential service called energy. Okay. Our final panel member is Mr. Harry Schmidt. He's a senior consultant with the Tennessee Valley Authority Economic Development in the Alabama region. And you already heard that the city of Huntsville purchases their power from the Tennessee Valley Authority. So over to you, Mr. Schmidt.
Appreciate the introduction, and I'm excited to be here as well. I'm hoping today to speak to you a little bit about energy as an enabler of economic growth throughout the region, but I'd be remiss if I didn't start by recognizing some of our teammates, TVA's teammates in the Huntsville region, and I think we have Daryl Williams, who's on the session today as well, who works directly with some of our direct serve partners, including Redstone Arsenal. And as Wes said, we partner directly with Huntsville Utilities to support economic growth throughout throughout Huntsville and North Alabama. I think that our key is that low cost and reliable energy is really a driver for economic growth throughout the region. TVA was founded on 3 clear points. We call them the 3 E's: energy, environment, and economic development. And that allows TVA, as economic development is one of our 3 core purposes, to invest significantly in economic development. So I look forward to speaking with you all a little bit more about our low cost and reliable energy. It's important to note that TVA's industrial rates are the lowest in among our peer institutions in the Southeast, in the top decile nationwide, and our transmission system has been rated 99.999% reliable since 2000. And so we think that that combination and the combination of our local partners allows us to attract significant economic investments, and we've certainly seen that throughout the Huntsville region over the years, but particularly in the last few years, significant investments from a wide range of companies that overall really work to advance the mission of economic development and raise the standard of living throughout the valley and the Huntsville area. So looking forward to visiting with all of you today.
Thanks, Harry. I really appreciate that. And it is going to be interesting to see how some of these things all start to blend together, whether it's through this panel or some of the additional panels today. So I'm going to go back just a little bit to Secretary Beeler's comments and ask each of you from your own perspective to help me out here. So we like to use this term resiliency. And today you heard both from Secretary Beeler and Lieutenant General Evans the term readiness and resilience and a relationship between the two. And then they tried to use the concept of energy resilience and link it to the military, specifically in their case, the Army's ability to deploy, fight, and win. And if they can't do those 3 elements because energy is impacting that ability, then they're not resilient. So in each of your specific situations, tell me what the term energy resiliency means to you. Let's start with you, Colonel Marks.
Well, thank you. Resiliency to us, or to me specifically, means it's there when you need it, that it's there in depth. If you have an issue with your power source in one way, you have the ability to flip to another source. And so when you're running large-scale tests, the types that we do that last over a long duration of time, that is critical to ensure that those tests are run properly, that a system is vetted to make sure that when it's put into action that it doesn't fail, especially if it's got crew members on it going to launching to space. So that's probably the biggest piece, is that you have it not only when you need it, but you have the opportunity to switch to other sources and have it in depth.
Okay, so in layman's terms, it's reliable, can be sustainable, and then it can be adaptable to a future situation. How's that sound?
I'll go with that too. Okay,
but you're the smart guy here. I'm just a moderator. So as an end user, which the NASA Space Center is there at Redstone Arsenal, they've got to be able to get their power from somewhere. Well, obviously that comes from the city of Huntsville, and so they're generating and providing the power. So, Mr. Kelley, in your terms, what does energy resilience mean to you?
Well, as you mentioned, in our role as a traditional distribution operator, resiliency first of mind is reliability, making sure that our local grid is operating appropriately and that the customers are getting served. Now, that means, of course, what you always think about: trees blow through and knock things down, and we got to go and put it back up. But really, I like to think of resiliency in three components. There's that typical grid reliability portion. There is the supply. Resilient supply is something that is going to become increasingly necessary, because in the old traditional world, where we had these big smokestacks that generated electricity, those things were pretty darn bulletproof. I mean, they were built to last, and they were built like battleships. Well, now we're moving to a more distributed energy situation where we've got more adaptive resources at the end of the grid that have to be interconnected. That interconnection points create opportunities for miscues. You got to get the relaying right. You got to get the control systems right. And so that's complicated. That's not something that our industry has experience with. We're learning as we go on that. But also in terms of supply, if you're using renewables, hot summer day, that sun's coming down, that 10 megawatt solar, such as exists on Redstone Arsenal, is producing, and then a large cloud comes over. And then what happens, right? The solar efficiency goes down, the amount of generation goes down. It's not like the lights can go down. It's not like the computers can go down. So something has to be able to stand up immediately and serve that load. Now, we've talked about batteries. Batteries are great, and that is an area of increasing technology development, but it's not there yet. Some of our peers are starting to look at substation level battery deployments, but they're still refining that technology. If you do it wrong, you just put a big explosive bomb next to your substation if that battery system doesn't operate right. That's not going to be resilient. So we got to refine that technology. We got to get it right. In the meantime, what do we use? Because battery technology is still new, and honestly, batteries of scale are huge. I don't think anyone wants to be seated in a building where there's a battery the size of a city block next to them. I don't think that's what we're talking about. So you have generation sources that have to be able to ramp up and ramp down to meet generation needs. So when those clouds roll through, you can power something up to meet that need. In other parts of the country, it's wind. When the wind stops blowing, you got to have something to ramp up and meet that. Traditionally, the power system operated off coal and nuclear as those base units. Coal is essentially dead. Tennessee Valley Authority over the last year only generated 13% of its power from coal. That's a bit shocking compared to where we used to be. Coal used to be the big daddy. Of course, TVA was originally founded with hydro. It quickly outgrew the hydro capacity of the system. Matter of fact, hydro today is about 10% of the power generated in the Tennessee Valley. Really, coal became the dominant source of energy until the 70s and 80s when nuclear arose, and TVA had very ambitious nuclear plans, which sort of settled out into a very respectable and strong nuclear fleet. Over the last year, 42% of the power in the Tennessee Valley came from nuclear. So again, 42% nuclear, 13% coal. You can see that that's a pretty dramatic difference. What's in the middle? Gas. Natural gas is right now that resilient player that allows supply to adapt, to rise and fall, to meet the needs, to balance against renewable sources and other more dynamic needs. One thing we all know about electricity is it has to be generated and consumed at essentially in balance with one another. While storage is developing, until that gets refined, every time the load increases, the generation has to increase to match. And when the load decreases, the generation has to decrease to match. And the fact that all that works still seems like magic to me, but it does. And good folks in Chattanooga, in our part of the world, are balancing all that to keep it working. So while I'm talking about load profile or portfolio management, I'll go ahead and round it out that TVA in the last year got 8% of its power it purchased from other people, and then 5% it purchased from renewable sources. So 5% of the Valley power came out of renewable sources. But that's not all the renewable that exists in the Tennessee Valley. There are customers that have renewable resources behind their meter. So here's another element of resiliency. You think, hey, I got my solar panels, I'm great, until they don't work. And then you need us, right, the traditional grid operator, to supply you power. How do we get that sequencing right? How do we get that working so that it's not, oh, I'm coming off my resilient power, now I need to power everything down in my building, switch over to the utility, and then let them take over, and then power everything back down and switch back to my local facility. No one wants to do that, right? It's got to be seamless. It has to operate in, I mean, we measure our performance in 60 cycles a second, and it has to be at that cycle level accuracy for all this to work. So we are struggling in a way to define resiliency from a grid operator perspective at that level of precision, at 60 cycles a second, and balancing this new distributed energy resources in a way that, quite frankly, is transparent to the customer, provides them maximum flexibility, great opportunities to be socially and environmentally conscious, but at the same time, no one wants to see any disruption in the way that it works today. So it's sort of like trying to change your crew in the middle of an airline flight. So you got to get the old crew off, you got to get the new crew on while the plane's in the air. And that's a little what it feels like, trying to balance these various generation opportunities in a real-time grid that can never turn off.
Wow. That's a lot of tremendous information, Wes. I appreciate that. Had me a little nervous there about the solar panels on my roof. But then when you brought it all together, I'm not going to be as concerned about trying to figure out how to switch from solar to grid power. As long as I turn my lights on in my computer and it works, I'm not going to get upset with them. So thank you. So Harry, you've now heard the energy user in the city of Huntsville, and you've heard, if you even think further downstream, the energy user on Redstone Arsenal, and it all goes back to you, the provider. And of course, I know Wes stole a lot of your thunder with regards to nuclear versus coal versus renewables versus, gas generated energy. So we can skip that part. But when I talk about energy resilience, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I'd certainly echo what Wes said. I think a key point of resilience is a diversified generation mix. And when we talked about the swings and the changes in the generation mix, but I think it's key that there are significant portions of our generation mix that are gas, coal, nuclear, and renewables as well. I think that two key points here that play together are continuous improvement, which is something that we're it's kind of preached company-wide and always a focus of ours, and then technology, and then how those play together. So what are we looking at to continually improve our process? Is it inventorying strategic assets throughout the region, like Redstone, on a larger level, and then a smaller scale, just within a community that are, when there are issues, how do we prioritize recovery from those issues? How do we look at the system as a whole in maintaining continuous improvements and upgrades to those systems, and as technology advances, incorporating those into the system? So are we incorporating more and better switching stations, which allow better sectionalization and isolation when issues occur, which allow issues to be less widespread throughout the system? Are we deploying more real-time power quality monitoring so that we're not hearing feedback down the road from industry or other end users as to what issues they may have had, or how one small blip may have created an expensive issue with their product? Using technology to be able to monitor those things on the fly. And then transmission-wide, establishing a long-term improvement plan. So are we replacing outdated technology? Are we increasing capacity and making system upgrades and routing and planning throughout the system? Our economic incentive programs are fairly unique in the industry in that we incentivize economic growth as opposed to just power sales. So our incentives aren't, you cross this number of megawatts, you get a better deal. From that, though, we receive 5-year projections, 5 and 10-year projections from industry throughout the region, and their incentives tie back to those projections. Well, when you add all of those up throughout our territory, we have 5 to 10 year projections from 800 companies throughout the region, which gives us really important, really specific company specific data on power usage and potential load growth and changes throughout our service territory. So it's I think by advancing tools and technology, we're able to continuously improve and continue to be resilient in what we've all clearly defined as a pretty rapidly changing market.
Excellent, Harry. Thanks. I really appreciate that. And so now I'm going to go to the planner. And so, Dennis, you've heard each of these individuals talk about this concept of energy resilience, and it's all fundamentally based on what they get today. And they've used terms like predictability and sustainability and adaptability and reliability. And I can throw out all sorts of itty words. But when it comes down to it, one of the biggest challenges we all face is this thing called growth and enhanced technology and demand. And so from your perspective, what does energy resilience mean in a planning for growth perspective?
Sure. Really good question. I was wondering how we were going to link myself in there. I was trying to answer that question. You're very good at this. A lot of folks, from our perspective, it really becomes a pitch point. When we're going out and we're trying to attract new industry, when we're trying to diversify, working with the arsenal to diversify what's happening on post, adding new and different kind of industry off post. This is a pitch point. This is us being able to say, look, you relocate here or you make an investment here, and to Wes's point, when you flip that switch, it's on. Frankly, a lot of them don't really care where it came from upstream. They just want to know when it switches, it comes on. And we know that growth can provide some unique challenges. Again, for folks who aren't as familiar with the Huntsville region, Huntsville is a little bit of an odd bird in terms of growth. A lot of folks who've engaged in our planning process in the past have heard me talk about the fact that the city of Huntsville is roughly 220 square miles. That's just the incorporated city of Huntsville. It doesn't include any other cities in the region. It doesn't include the arsenal. To put that in some level of context, the city of Huntsville has more square miles incorporated than Atlanta, than Las Vegas, than Philadelphia. You're talking about some significantly more densely developed cities, and we have more land than them. So that provides a certain level of challenge of, making you extend that energy infrastructure over a much greater area. But at the same time, we've also begun to shift our growth focus and say, all right, well, while we're going to continue to see some sort of perimeter growth, we're also focusing on redeveloping a lot of core sites, things that had been left behind over intervening decades. There's redevelopment of old malls, redevelopment of underperforming strip centers, and we're adding new demand, new development and thus new demand on these sites. So for us, it is knowing that folks like Wes and organizations like TVA can respond to the fact that we are changing not just demand in terms of how we're growing, but how it's delivered and what that development impact is going to ask them to do. The best part is, Wes talks with the city, talks with us in the city constantly. I mean, probably on a weekly basis, he's engaging with folks either in urban development or the administration. So a big part of it is making sure that while whatever we see coming over the horizon, he sees the same thing.
And I think that's significant, Dennis, that it's all got to be in a collaborative process, because if one person's trying to do something, the other one's not cognizant of it, it makes it extremely challenging, and nobody wants those oops moments that are going on. So I'm going to ask Wes a question, because it's going to be focused specifically on the city of Huntsville with this thing called the Arsenal as the end user. And then, Bill, I'm going to come to you and ask you basically, how are they doing? And so let's think about this, Wes. And I've had a chance to visit the Arsenal a couple of times, went in uniform, and then I had a chance to visit the city of Huntsville in a previous capacity since I retired and actually tour the research park and, be a recipient of several briefings with regards to this growth that is actually occurring in the Huntsville area and what you just referred to, Dennis. But Wes, sometimes, and I live here, by the way, in Central Texas, right outside Fort Hood. And so you always kind of get that chicken and egg perspective. Would Huntsville be what it is if the arsenal wasn't there? Would the arsenal be what it is if Huntsville didn't adapt and grow accordingly? But understanding that intimate relationship and significant reliance, I will say, do you as a provider believe you are providing the arsenal reliable, secure power so that they have minimal, if any, outages that you can control? Because I know you can't control natural disasters, which tend to come through Alabama periodically. So, Wes.
Well, we are working on expanding our relationship with the arsenal. So at this point, the arsenal gets its power directly from the TVA transmission system, and then it has contractors that serve that infrastructure maintenance needs. But we are talking about expanding our relationship so that Huntsville Utilities can step in as an operator of the electric, water, and gas infrastructure on the base itself. So those wheels are in motion, conversations are underway. However, in light of that, everything that happens outside the fence is absolutely 100% Huntsville Utilities area. And indeed, I should say, even inside the fence, the water comes from Huntsville. Most of the water, not all, most of the water comes from Huntsville Utilities, and the gas flows through our distribution pipes as well. So in terms of reliability, let me tell you, there's one customer that probably gets higher on the priority list, and that's Huntsville Hospital. Anybody in our community knows we've got a multi-city block-long hospital infrastructure, and that is top priority. And we make sure that that hospital receives all of the services it needs as quickly as it can. But I got to tell you, hot on the heels of that is everything, not just involving the arsenal, but also what's happening right outside the arsenal at Redstone Gateway, and then what happens right across 565 in Research Park. We understand where this community's bread is buttered. If those facilities from Research Park all the way down to the river at the arsenal are not taken care of, that is the cash register of Huntsville, Alabama. And we need to make sure that business can be conducted. Utilities, we're just infrastructure providers. We are there to make sure that other people can do their work. We are foundational, yes, but we're not the star of the show. We are supporting players. And so if we don't get done what we need to get done, then commerce can't happen, quality of life suffers, and absolutely the community doesn't know what to do, can't do anything. And so we recognize our primary role is making sure that good business can take place. And in the case of the arsenal, we are always ready to stand and support them. And we look forward to expanding our footprint and role with the arsenal to make sure that, because the distribution systems that exist on base and the distribution systems that exist off base look the same. It's the same thing. And so wherever we can get synergies and economic benefits, but more importantly, that word again, resiliency, I've got a team of many linemen, and I can deploy them where needs best to be deployed. And so we can hit a target hard and quickly and resolve a problem. Whereas if you're doing something more one-off, such as the base has been up to this point, very well done. But I think Huntsville Utilities brings increased flexibility and increased opportunity to make sure that that reliability stays high and indeed, I hope, improves.
That's excellent, Wes. And I appreciate the relationship between Huntsville Utilities, the TVA, as well as the installation. So Colonel Marks, stand by. So Harry, then you get a chance to play in this trivia question. So from your perspective then, does the TVA do everything it possibly can to ensure reliable, sustainable, and secure energy is provided to the Redstone, especially with the mission set that they have in support of our national defense?
Well, yeah, I'd say that we do, but I'd also qualify that with the benefit of having 10,000 coworkers is that falls under the expertise of some of my coworkers, and so I can't really speak. While I know that they do everything that they can, I can't get into too much of the detail of what they are doing. I would like to add on to what Wes said, in that not to let him undersell that he's just infrastructure for supporting the industry in the area around here. I've been in meetings with industry when they maybe change the specs of needs at the last minute and that sort of thing, and watched Wes instantaneously say, yeah, that no matter how large it was, yes, that's fine, we'll make sure it happens, and then quickly delivers on what they've said. And as Dennis said earlier, this all three of us have worked in a number of different places, but I think that it is certainly nice to see how all of these entities work so well together in this community and are extremely well coordinated in their efforts. And so just from our conversation today, you see how they all layer on top of each other, but none of them have issues laying on top of each other, and their support and capacity of doing that are part of why you see the success of Research Park, of areas out towards Limestone County and throughout Huntsville.
No, that's excellent, Harry. I appreciate that. And truly, it does take a village to ensure success in many of these instances. And even though one person might think they're just there to work 8 hours a day, they're actually making a difference and providing a very required and desired capability. So now to you, Colonel Marks, not as your role as the deputy director, but as your role as the former garrison commander on the Redstone Arsenal. Are they telling the truth?
Well, yeah, actually, we draw power from both sources, and actually one more draw that power. So the natural gas from Marshall Space Flight Center, we have weaned ourselves off some level of steam being one of the components of power we get from the solid waste disposal agency that runs the HVAC systems along Martin Road primarily. We weaned ourselves off of some of that and replaced it with natural gas that gave us about a $2 million savings from that alone. So you see that they're overlaid, and we're very excited about that. We're very excited about being a customer of Huntsville Utilities, as well as TVA and SWATA, as well as the solar array. We've incorporated solar power on top of at least 3 of our buildings so far. That's given us an additional 276 kilowatts of power. So part of that is to reduce the requirement. Also builds in some resiliency in terms of what you need to make sure that when you do need it, it's there, that you're not, contributing to brownouts or things like that. And so everybody from the customer standpoint has to also do their part. As a partner in the community, that's from the customer standpoint. As a partner in the community, we're very pleased with and excited to work with the TVA and Huntsville Utilities on a number of initiatives. On the customer side, kind of going back to that, we enjoy a great relationship as we involve UESCs. Marshall's just starting down that road, but the Army, on the Army side, has been along that road and literally have provided hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of cost savings and energy savings as a result. And we're looking forward on the Marshall side to get into that as well. We've already started a couple of initiatives with them with some smart lighting and things like that. But from a community partner side, the water system, I think, from Huntsville Utilities runs all the way around the arsenal. And when it could run straight across the arsenal, and I know that during the days that I was sitting in the seat at Garrison Command, we opened up the door to start, hey, how can we get that line going straight across the arsenal versus, going all the way around? It does a couple of things. It keeps our water circulated at a more rapid pace. but it also provides some efficiencies for the customers as well as the Huntsville utilities. And so as a partner, we're happy to work with any of them and understand what it means to the broader community. As a customer, we're extremely happy with them in all regards as well.
Thanks, Colonel Marks. And to be honest, I didn't expect anything different. And it's kind of interesting when you talked about the water utility and the line, it seems so simple. It falls into that category of common sense. Unfortunately, as a former DOD guy, sometimes common sense is a little bit difficult challenge to overcome. So one last question to the four of you before we open it up for any questions from the audience writ large. And this one is, each of you will have, I think, a different perspective, but I'd be curious to hear from our planner first. And that relates to this thing called technology. And so if we think in terms of modern technology, I put quotations around that, the majority of our infrastructure across the United States is 1970s, 80s. You know, Wes, you even talked about gas and coal and other things, even nuclear in the TVA area. But today's technology far exceeds the capability and demand that came from yesteryear's infrastructure. And so, first of all, planner, what do we need to do today to prepare ourselves for the demand that comes from enhanced technology and facilities that we are constructing with today's technology, but yesterday's infrastructure?
Sure. Well, part of it is I feel like, especially in the partnership with Huntsville Utilities, we're already doing it. I am 2 weeks now with Google Fiber at the home. That's why you can see the stubble on my head. The picture's so clear. But that is, you're right. That's the future. And when we look at a lot of kind of planning issues that we're dealing with in terms of, let's say, even just transportation management, which is, transportation's infrastructure. High functioning transportation network is incredibly important to development. The transportation network of the future will be technology driven, whether it's real-time signal management, whether we're going as far as autonomous vehicles. We'll need that level of data infrastructure. We'll need to pay the same level of attention to data infrastructure as we are, water, electric, gas, everything else. And I think bringing that along, thinking about it as sort of the new important aspect of infrastructure is going to be crucial to us sustaining our growth. I think we've done a fantastic job in our partnerships with TVA and Huntsville Utilities and Redstone in making sure that our infrastructure not only is expanding, but staying updated and staying well maintained. But I think we're going to, the big piece will be managing that data piece in advance.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. You've got a thought process in place. We got to see how it plays out. So, Harry, to you, as you really think about systems that have been there for years, maybe even your grandparents were around when some of that system was being developed. And so now as you think, as we migrate to modern capability to not only generate, but transmit and deliver power, what's TVA doing about that?
Yeah, this is the really cool stuff to think about. The stuff Dennis mentioned. I think we've been doing something about it for the last few years, just as Wes explained in the generation mix and the evolution of that. Coal is not always being retired because of environmental concerns. That's certainly one of it, but it's also their aging infrastructure, and they're being replaced with modern infrastructure, which is exactly what we're talking about. A couple of years ago, TVA announced a $300 million fiber backbone build throughout our service territory. Fortunately for this area, this is one of the first components of that fiber build out, and that further advances our capacity and to handle more quickly and larger loads of information to better connect TVA assets, power company assets, and the like throughout our service territory. And I think also you learn a lot from who we're dealing with. So we've located Google data center and a Facebook data center in Huntsville and North Alabama over the last few years. It creates tremendous benefits for the area as far as improved infrastructure that occurs to serve those facilities. I think there's an important point to note that as we recruit larger load, larger power users to the area, that requires system upgrades and improvements on our system. Those improvements don't just benefit that one user, they benefit the entire region or the entire network. And so everyone is benefiting from some of these, but also the requirements that come with some of these new technology companies, the different perspective that they offer and the things that they want to see sometimes require us to rethink how we may deliver something, how we may structure something in order to meet their needs and to get them into the community. And oftentimes that is reflected in updated policies or updated ways of thinking about things. So sometimes it is the infrastructure in the ground or the generation infrastructure, and sometimes technology and improvements cause new processes, new ways of thinking. So I think we're taking all that into account and working on all of those different angles.
That's great news, Harry. And I know the people in the Tennessee Valley area appreciate that forward thinking because it's going to be essential as we move forward. So Wes, as the utilities director there in Huntsville, you obviously got to have a hand in the past. You only have two hands and you got one in the present, but you also need to be looking at the future. And so what can you and your staff do to ensure that as emerging technology becomes a reality, it's not overwhelmed by the inability to provide for that demand from a power perspective?
Well, that's a perceptive question, and one that I think we're still getting acclimated to. So a number of years ago, Huntsville Utilities stepped up and put in a fiber optic network across the city. So that's about 1,100 miles of route miles of fiber that we install within the city of Huntsville. Dennis mentioned Google Fiber. They lease that fiber from us to provide that retail service. But that fiber is also being used for a host of other benefits, both for utility and municipal functions, and some third parties, including perhaps some of the people that are participating here today are getting telecommunication services from someone who is leasing that fiber from us. The city of Huntsville really led the way on that because we wanted to be innovative. And we wanted to, again, we're the infrastructure provider. What's the infrastructure of the future look like? And we realized data was key. And Dennis mentioned that right off the bat. And we need to be able to move data quickly and in great quantities. And that includes end customers that want to be able to move data quickly and in great quantities, and we as the utility provider. One of the things we did, which is very simple, and we're in the midst of deploying now, is a new metering system. The old meterings really hadn't changed in 100 years. You send a guy or a gal out, they scribble down on a piece of paper what they think that meter reading is as they read the funky little dials that go up and down in various odd combinations. Well, obviously there's opportunity for mistake there. What makes more sense? Put a digital device there that sends a signal out and we read it basically instantaneously. So those two pieces of technology are the fiber project is largely completed now. The AMI project is well on its way. About 60% of the meters in Huntsville have been replaced at this point. So we are leveraging that investment that we made over the last couple of years. Both of those are multi-year, very expensive projects. So we're settling those out and then preparing for what's next. So what's next? Electric transportation, I think, is going to be a big player. And I think we need to be prepared, not only prepared to deal with it, but prepared to incentivize it, prepared to encourage it. I think that it's one of those wins. Often the traditional utility providers are seen as stick in the muds, trying to stand in the way of innovation. That's one that everybody wins on. If we can reduce greenhouse gases through getting combustion turbine engines retired, we can get good users of electricity. As one thing we've not talked about is domestic consumption is declining. So in your house today, you're using less electricity to do the same thing than you were 5 years ago. So what does that mean? Well, it means we're not building power plants like we used to. As Harry talked about, we're retiring some of the ones we have just because they're getting old. Well, in the old days, we would be replacing them with new ones. Guess what we're not doing? We're not replacing them. So what are we going to do? We're figuring that out together, right? And so as we look at that declining overall usage in electricity, which is great, because you know those darn little LED light bulbs you buy at Home Depot, those suckers work. They do use a lot less electricity to provide a great service. And so there are going to be continuing evolutions in technology that make the system more efficient. And just to go off on a tangent for just a minute, energy efficiency used to be a big topic of conversation. We're not talking about that so much anymore. You know why? Because it's working. And because it's working, it doesn't particularly have to be incentivized or advertised because people are naturally doing the right thing for the right reasons, and it's cost effective to do so. So therefore, keep doing what you're doing, but then we have to adapt to that. So we are pivoting away from energy efficiency, not to discourage it by any stretch, but if we're gonna put our shoulder into something, it needs to be on the next thing that needs work. So electric transportation is one of those things. Smart city initiatives, as Dennis mentioned, there are tentacles out there all over the place. We're helping the city with some new camera systems, traffic control systems, other new technologies to make Huntsville a better place to live. And what's our role as an infrastructure provider to help link that and make it better. And then talking to customers, people who are doing innovative things behind their meter, we need to know about that, not to stop them, but to understand it and then see big picture, how do we piece all of it together? How do we make this a dynamic two-way grid without breaking the grid? And we can't do that until we start rolling around in it and learning what to do with it. So we've got a lot of exciting things. I feel like we're the dog chasing the car. I don't know, every once in a while, like with the fiber project, we catch the car and then we don't know what to do with it. Well, we've kind of processed through that. So now we're taking a breath for a moment, and then we're going to get ready to move on to the next phase of innovation.
Thanks, Wes. Those were some powerful ideas and comments. Hopefully this is being recorded because you're going to want to go back and listen to what you just said, because truthfully, if you can put all those pieces and parts into play, it's going to change the dynamics in the Huntsville area. So now, Colonel Marks, to you, and whether it's in your role with NASA or it's in your role as the garrison commander, infrastructure into the Department of Defense has been aging for, I'm going to say, 20 plus years. And the opportunity for Milcon and to build new is limited. And generally, normally, when you build new, you limit what you can put in it simply because from a cost perspective. Yet technology is overwhelming us in our ability to execute our wartime mission and operational needs and requirements. So what can the Redstone do, or what can NASA do, especially as a tenant on Redstone, to ensure your infrastructure is able to keep up with modern technology?
So that's a great question, and we do have an answer for that from the Marshall standpoint. And Marshall and military construction operate a little bit differently. Marshall's a much smaller organization, obviously, than the DoD, but I can tell you that they do put money into infrastructure. We have a square footage or infrastructure reduction program where we're trying to reduce our footprint by 25%. And when we do repair something, instead of repairing it or renovating it, we tear it down and replace it with a lead silver at a minimum building. And so we have 7 on the arsenal that we built here recently, and the last one earned 3 globes. And it's so that's one of the things, and they're actually more capable than the building that it replaced. The next building on our list, we won't replace it, but it will be building 4200, which is an old 1960s era building, very inefficient. And the way we're gonna replace it is primarily admin building, but with learning from experiences. One thing that this pandemic has taught us is that we can incorporate telework at a much higher level than before. And so instead of replacing a whole new building that was inefficient, we're not going to replace it all and use existing infrastructure. And a lot of those buildings that we're referring to actually are LEED silver. So taking a look at what you have and then how you replace it is key, I think. In terms of energy efficient, it doesn't necessarily take technology. Sometimes it takes just aligning, alternate work schedule days. We had prior to me arriving, but the Marshall took a look and they attacked them. You're so innovative, this team. They took a look at the alternate work schedule day, a day when most people didn't work, and they were staggered across the board. They said, well, what happens if we align that and everybody take a Friday on the same day? You're able to put several buildings into weekend mode, which saved us last year $460,000. And so part of the resiliency is reducing your demand. That obviously, that you can help ensure that more is available in your area. Power when you need it, and when you need it, you're using it efficiently. So from an infrastructure standpoint, Marshall has a unique or not Marshall, but NASA has a unique method of rebuilding or replacing old infrastructure. The Army will try to renovate, but incorporating all of the aspects of LEED as possible, incorporating smart lighting, LED lighting, smart city, and smart grid technologies as well.
Thanks, Bill. I really love the part about why continue to put Band-Aid fixes and repair on an infrastructure that's outlived its usefulness and build new. I wish we could get more of that inside the Department of Defense. So I really wanted to keep this going, but I can see Grace on the net, and I've already been given the hook by one of the facilitators. So I encourage Wes and Harry specifically, go into the chat. There's a great question for the two of you that you might be able to engage and respond to Jay on. But to the four of you, there's a reason why I was made the moderator and not a panel member. I could not have held a candle to any of you with regards to today's technology and wisdom and knowledge that you have associated with potential growth from a power perspective and sustainment and reliability to our nation's grid. So thanks to each of you for being a part of this session. I feel honored and blessed to have had a chance to be your moderator, and I wish you nothing but continued success in the Huntsville area as you go forward. Dr. Bohenick, thank you for the opportunity, and back to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Ken. And I can't say enough thank you to the panel, Bill, Wes, Dennis, and Harry. It was just tremendous. I think that's exactly the kind of conversation that we were hoping to have. And I know that all the members across Energy Huntsville are just anxious to see where the future goes. And the idea of smart cities, electric vehicles, and that future seems pretty bright with all of you in the positions you are. So thank you again very much. And Ken, thank you.